discussion for the Aronimink Golf Club land improvements. But first, first we'll start with, you do roll call?
Mr. Silva,
Here.
Mr. Guy, Mr. Winterhalter,
Here.
Mr. Evans, Mr. Edwards,
Here.
Ms. McGowan.
Here.
Thank you. And we will have a moment of silence, and then we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Anyone on the board have any comments on the agenda?
No comments.
So first up, we have any comments on the minutes from October 24th? If not, do we have a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve the minutes from October the 24th, 2024.
We have a second.
Second.
All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. So as I said, the two conditional use reviews that were scheduled have been pushed off till December 30th. And we have plan review for Aronimink Golf Club. Good, he's got the pictures.
Okay.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, good evening. May it please the Planning Commission. My name is Mark D'Amico. I'm an attorney in media and here tonight representing Aronimink Golf Club. And with me tonight are Neil Kamens. Neil was just handing out the little packet. Neil is a project civil engineer with Chester Valley Engineers. Bill Berry is over there in the corner, past president of Aronimink. Andrew Whitelaw is sitting right there. And Ryan Ogle is behind Bill, and that's Mike Lewis there, who's also as a member of Aronimink involved with the PGA championship. So as you all know, Aronimink is located in the township consisting of approximately 300 acres. It is zoned R1. The bulk of the property was acquired by the club in 1926, so about 98 years ago, and the golf course, the Donald Ross Golf Course, was opened in 1928. So the property's use of the as a golf club predates the zoning ordinance from 1938. As you see some familiar faces here, I think everybody remembers that we have been in front of the Planning Commission on several occasions over the last couple of years for both phase 1 and phase 2 land developments, which is essentially based on a master plan developed by the club over a number of years to make significant capital improvements to the club to make it and keep it a high quality club for the benefit of the members and the residents of the township, so we can hopefully keep this 300 acres sustainable and mostly open space for the next 100 years. In your packet, just to review, to sort of digress, but since you took the time to give us so much of your time over the last couple of years, if you look at the second page behind the cover page, that's a overview of the middle of the clubhouse, or the middle of the club, excuse me, property. And if you go to the next page, that is the golf patio. So that, if you remember, that was one of the projects in the first phase of the land development application that we presented a couple years ago. So that's done, open, and very attractive. The next page is labeled Golf Performance Center. So again, that was phase phase one. That was the essentially an indoor golfing facility that allows teaching and playing golf on simulators. Those garage doors on the back open out to the driving range. So you can actually hit, real golf balls onto the driving range from inside. So that was phase one. You go to the next page, you've got a page that's identified Rackets facility and Belmont facility. So that was phase two, which we were more recently got approved from the township in the summer of 23. Those plans didn't get recorded until actually the spring of 24. So this is all under construction. The Rackets facility is largely complete, and the pool and the Belmont is under construction. So I thought that might be helpful for you all to see what your input is done for the club. Tonight, we're here to present and discuss the broadcast compound, and Neil Kamens is going to review that with you momentarily in detail. And yeah, on the screen is essentially an overview of an aerial photograph showing overlaid in color in the right-hand side in the upper corner where the broadcast compound will be. That's essentially the area in lighter shade.
Can you give some background on what it's a broadcast?
Yeah, I'm going to let Ryan do that in a second.
Okay.
I don't want to steal his thunder. And then I'm going to have Mr. Whitelaw just review a little bit about some of the things that Aronimink does in terms of environmental stewardship. So why don't we have Ryan come up now?
Good evening. Thanks for allowing me to speak for a moment. Ryan Ogle, Championship Director for the PGA Championship, employed by the PGA of America, and we're excited to return back to Newtown Square, Newtown Township for the 2026 PGA. Our event, our organization operated the 2020 Women's PGA that unfortunately had no spectators due to COVID. But before that, the last time we were here was 1962. And a lot's changed in that amount of time when Gary Player won at Aronimink. The event has grown in magnitude, both from a brand, but also a scale. Fortunately for us, we have some past events to learn from, 2018 BMW Championship and a couple others. Although not our organization, and we don't have direct plans, we have some contacts. We have heard some things, some feedback from the club. So we're taking into consideration some of that. But I just want to make it clear that different organization, although we're all operating golf events. The championship, as we said, we'll reach it. It's a different scale than what you saw in 2018. We'll have about 200,000 guests for the week attend our championship. The size of the event and scale is quite drastic. The economic impact with that is substantial. Based on studies from 2024, 2023, and 2022, we can safely assume about $130 to $150 million economic impact to the region. Now, that might not go directly in the bank account of the township, but that does go to your businesses, your constituents, those employees. But just as important is actually the exposure from our broadcast. Our broadcast will reach 181 countries and territories, and over 500 million households will have access. It's broadcasted through CBS and ESPN. And through our digital channels, there's actually over 250 hours of cumulative live coverage from the area over about a 10-day span. So that alone is quite exposure. And I think it's key to point out that the host site, every time we're there, will mention Newtown. It will not mention Philadelphia. It will not mention Philly. We're going to make this very local. And if you were to do a Nielsen study, which we actually do after every one of our events, we partner with Nielsen to do a holistic media evaluation of different brands. Of course, the PGA of America, the PGA Championship, but we also evaluate the host city and the host club. And since 2021 combined, they've exceeded $150 million in holistic media value. So if you were to go out and promote the community, it'd be equivalent of that. So that's a very big impact to the area. It puts a community on the map as far as being a place that can host major events, that is open to a great place to visit to hopefully invest in as well. After multiple visits, really our planning process with an event of this magnitude starts about 3 years out. So we came in August of 2023 for our initial site visit, although some of the leadership have been here before, and started mapping out our largest needs, the largest need being a broadcast compound. The size of the broadcast compound is such that it's the first thing we identify. And Aronimink being a club dating back so far in history, it's small, it's tight for the size of this or an event of this magnitude. So when meeting with the club, we've talked through different scenarios and really identified we don't have a lot of options, and this one is an important one to us to be able to broadcast this event globally. So it is important, and we really want to make sure that we do the right thing. We've already had early conversations with Stephen and his team, some great collaboration already, and we look forward to future conversations about how the event will operate, how we'll manage the influx of guests and visitors, how we'll make sure that they have a great time, but also the residents, the businesses see a benefit of the event. So look forward to future conversations, here to support the club and what is a very important part of our championship.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody have any questions of Ryan before he?
Are you the one who's going to tell us what exactly a broadcast compound is? What?
Yeah, I can shed a little
Please.
light.
That'd be
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah. So what's unique about our event is, when you go to a Phillies game or an Eagles game, everything's there, right? You have your parking lot, you have your restroom, you have your bleachers. We have to build all of that on the golf course temporarily, right? And then tear it all down. Well, the things you don't see when you go to those are the things we don't want you to see. And one of those is a broadcast compound. That mainly makes up of, for us, a bunch of trailers that they ship across the nation to put this on, anywhere from 25 to 30 semi-truck trips will be dropped off. And inside of those are producers. And basically the nuts and bolts of the product. So they have staff that are working there, and they're broadcasting our championship to, I said, 181 countries and territories. There's also trailer space, temporary trailers that will be erected for working offices, as well as compound space for their logistics and their operations. So they'll bring in golf carts to traverse the golf course. They'll have a lot of equipment. They have to build TV towers. That'll be staged there, put up, and then tear down. So it's basically a central hub of our broadcast efforts. So it houses CBS affiliates, ESPN, as well as our international broadcast partner, which has historically been Sky. Does that help shed a light at all?
Yes. Is there going to be additional parking area in there for these personnel who are working?
We will, if space allows, we will have a small allocation of parking as needed for typically the higher ranking people working there. We will most likely at this site have to find an offsite parking lot for the
Rank and file?
Yeah, for the cameramen and the runners, and shuttle them in and out throughout the week.
How many trailers are we talking about?
Well, it depends. Every year we get a new set of plans. I would say it's roughly probably 15 to 20 temporary trailer offices, and anywhere from 25 to 30 semi-trailer that have all the equipment.
How big are they?
I can't throw that off. I'm not well versed in that. I apologize.
So this is.
How many
just a
people are in them?
It depends. Depends with
Like,
the
are we
size of
talking 5? Are we talking 25?
it can fluctuate. Some of these
What's the
trailers.
largest, like, biggest trailer holds how many people?
Well, there's 10 by 40 trailers, and there may be 2 or 3
Mhm.
that could be combined into working space and working offices. The semi-truck trailers are, if you see a semi-truck, it's about that same size.
Okay.
So those are the size of them.
So this site is just temporary for the event.
We will utilize it for actually a couple months leading into and then the week of for our championship. I think they'll get into more details about these.
Maybe Ryan might help them for context. If you could tell them how you did the television for the KPMG and how this compares to that tournament.
Yeah, it's different broadcast partners. Same thing with BMW Championship. And it's just a smaller scale. At a major championship, ours being one of the 4 majors, the amount of production and distribution is much greater. And they also come in and bring a lot more technology. So what's that mean is more cameras, more people. And that's why the scale is such that it's much larger than we've seen in the past here at this golf club.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ryan. So Andrew.
Good evening, everybody. Andrew Whitelaw, I'm the GM CEO at Aronimink Golf Club. I just wanted to give everyone a kind of high-level overview of the environmental stewardship programs that we run at the club. I know a lot of people already know a lot of the things we do at the club, but Aronimink is it's an open space, obviously. We're around 300 acres, most of which is has streams, ponds, and native areas and mature woodlands across the whole campus. We have a thriving wildlife population out on the course as well. One thing we're very proud of, Aronimink is a certified Audubon Cooperative Sanctuary member. There's only around 500 courses in the US that are certified that way. To reach that certification, a course has to demonstrate a high degree of environmental quality in a number of different areas, such as environmental planning, wildlife and habitat management, outreach and education, chemical use reduction, water conservation, and water quality management. So we're very proud of that. That's a big program that we run. And part of that program as well is our cavity nester program, which we've been running this program since 1995. We have around 35 bird boxes, which are monitored weekly from March through November. Recently in 2023, as part of our education and outreach program, that is now, one of the bird boxes is now streamed live, and everybody can gain education on how we develop that program for the wildlife. In terms of sustainability, Aronimink supports the township and Newtown Square sustainability effort. We're a member of the Newtown Green Business Coalition. In terms of trees and shrubs, we annually plant out with this area that we're talking about today. Obviously, we plant on average of 30 to 50 trees a year on our campus to ensure that we're environmentally friendly. We do have a big landscape program, and we use plants of all types of perennials and annuals all year. And our garden manager is very committed to using native plants and developing native areas around the property wherever possible. Our tree care and investment, we work with several arborists and tree care specialists to maintain the trees throughout the entire property. So we're very, very engaged in making sure that we do maintain our trees correctly. Our investment in our tree population is quite significant. So we are very, very active environmentally. John Goslin, who's our superintendent, isn't here tonight. He manages this program, but hopefully that background gives everybody a snapshot of our environmental stewardship that we take care of at the property.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. So just before Neil gets up, I just wanted to take a step back and just give the Planning Commission members just a brief procedural history. We're here tonight, but this project started many months ago in planning. We did meet with the township staff back in June. Neil was at that meeting, and there was a grading plan that was reviewed. There is, as you know, from looking at the plans, a stormwater management associated with the plan. At that meeting, even though, as you all know, that's the gray areas there are temporary gravel and they're coming up, and then we're going to restore this to a meadow. The township asked us whether we could keep the stormwater management system in place, and Aronimink agreed to do that. So in September, Neil submitted to the township essentially an earlier version of this plan so that we could get a review of that to make sure that we're all on the same page. Township engineer did review that at the time. The township also suggested that it would be appropriate to make a full land development application. And I know that was part of the EAC comments, was they wanted a full review, and that's what this is, right? This is a full land development application. It's been reviewed by the county. It's an Act 247 application, and they recommended approval of the plan. Been reviewed, as you know, a couple times by the township arborist, a couple times by the township engineer, by the township zoning officer, township fire marshal. So this is going through a full review process, right? But you will see that we have asked for a waiver. And why did we ask for a waiver? And the answer at this point is really, it's just a little technical, right? At the beginning, the concept was this really land development? There's no buildings, right? But but we're beyond that, right? So it's full land development. We are asking for a waiver, and essentially it's the same thing, only the only difference being that this would allow us, because these improvements are temporary, we wouldn't need to record the plan. Doesn't seem a lot of point to that since those improvements won't be there very long. It also saves us a little time in having to go through a process where we have to sign and record a land development land development agreement, excuse me, that will only really impact the property for a couple months. So, but other than that, it's really the same thing, right? It's the same full review, same review by the planning commission. We will need to go in front of and get the approval of the supervisors, whether that's in the form of approving this as a land development plan or waiving it. So it's a distinction without a difference, but it does help us a little bit on the edges. And every bit along the edges is important. We haven't really talked about this, but we talked about it with the staff. We're a little behind the 8 ball on this project. This probably should have been in construction by now. And we still obviously need to go through the township, and just as importantly, we need to get a NPDS permit from the County Conservation District because we're disturbing more than 1 acre. That application is probably going to go in tomorrow. As you may know, over the last couple of years, that process has slowed down. So we expect that'll take several months, and we're going to do everything we can to get that permit and try to start construction, in the early spring. So, Neil.
I'm Neil Kamens with Chester Valley Engineers. Not to try to repeat anything people said, but maybe to bring back from a township plan perspective. We're proposing grading relatively flat areas. Everything that's gray on here is gravel with a few exceptions. There are a couple areas that are regular asphalt pavement, both at the road, where we actually already have an HOP from PennDOT. And then this driveway that cuts between those 2 tiers would be paved. The rest would be gravel, and that's mostly just for what's easier to do. It's easier to remove and restore, and it just saves everybody effort and money. That's the reason we're doing gravel instead of paving. They've kind of talked around it, but the time when this place will be full will be 10, 14 days. The way they've explained it to me, all the trucks that come here, all these tractor trailers are at another tournament the week or 2 weeks before. So they start coming in that week before, they set things up. There are already some people who are there a little longer. And then come Monday morning, everybody starts leaving, maybe some Sunday night. By the next weekend, virtually everything's gone. And then the club goes about the process of removing all the gravel and turning that back into a meadow. They have done similar things with what they call the vendor compound, which is on the other side of the club, but it's a lot smaller. It's just not big enough for the equipment and the people they need here. There was a question about parking. They kind of got to this answer, but just to be clear, the way I look at it, almost everybody working here is going to be parking in a satellite lot like the spectators, and they're going to be through a transportation plan, much like the club has done with tournaments in the past, that they work through with the township, that they work with the township police department on all that stuff is still going to happen, but that's going to happen closer to the tournament. This is the thing that the club is responsible for building for the PGA. And that's why we're here doing this. The PGA is responsible for a lot of the individual things that they'll be coming to the township later, as far as the actual temporary structures with the tournament, as far as the parking plan, logistics, all those other things. Just to try to help. We've talked about some of the numbers. There's about 10.5 acres of disturbance. So everything you see on the green outline would be grading. So the outside of the green with the gravel is about 10.5 acres. There is then about 4.5 acres of gravel. I mentioned about 1/10 of an acre of bituminous pavement.
Benoni has a note that if you want to use gravel, you'll need a variance.
So that,
that
I mean,
right?
we can talk about the specific comments. There is a section in the zoning that says parking, unless otherwise specified, should be pavement. So we have 2 thoughts. One is we're specifying something else. So it's the unless otherwise specified. And this is not, a lot of the code sections that are referenced are for like what we think of as a parking lot where members of the public, whether they're a private club or, you know, Wawa, but people off the street drive their private vehicle in. They need to have marked parking spaces. They need to have lighting. They need to have islands, all those things that we think of because it's meant to be an area to allow visitors' vehicles to park in an orderly manner. This is not that. This is basically a big flat area that individual pieces of equipment, a lot of them on trucks, some of them like modular offices will be assembled by people with the specific task of doing that according to a plan that they have. And then people that come in there, whether they're gonna walk, coming on golf carts, coming on some shuttle bus, whether it comes directly into that area or to another part of the club and they walk over. So a lot of these things, when there's the section about lighting and the section about paving for a parking lot, that's our take that we're not really building a parking lot. We're building a area, and if we could magically put these things on grass, we would do that, but it's, you know, then we're dependent on the weather and what happens.
Yeah, and my motivation is, you know, you say you're in a time constraint. If we get the cart before the horse and it turns out you actually need a variance and then you've got to go back to do that. So I'm just trying
We
process.
recognize.
It's a process question.
Yeah, I would say in response to that, we've had a discussion with the township already, the staff, and we understand that there's a couple things here, just a couple points here that matters, zoning interpretation. It's our intention to just continue to work with the township zoning officer and solicitor. And we think we're going to be able to work through those. Worst case scenarios, we would have to go to the zoning hearing board, and we would have time to do that, where it's not our preference. If we have to, we have to, but we're confident we'll be able to work through it either way.
So I want to get back, so about half this area, even though we graded, is gonna be landscaped, mostly with grass. There is a landscape buffer, you can kind of see these colored symbols wrapping around the top of the parking lot, and then the east side is a, you know, more of what you think is a planted, dedicated landscape buffer with about 60 plants in it. And that's an area where we don't have remaining woods between us and the street or between us and the adjacent property owner. We have 3 stormwater facilities. We're gonna have a small basin near the entrance. That water actually drains to an existing drainage system that crosses St. David's Road and then gets into Darby Creek through piping on that side. Most of the water drains to a large surface basin that we have below the tiers of the parking lot, and then some of it drains to a smaller surface basin. As Mark mentioned, all those things are gonna stay. So when we do this, and you probably heard this, you know, for everybody's development that comes in, the township ordinance actually requires us to reduce runoff from the existing conditions to something lower. We have to take what looks like a 2-year storm and turn it to what looks like a 1-year storm, a 10-year storm to a 5-year storm, so on. So there's a small reduction when we build the gravel. And I say small, it's really not teeny, it's about between 20 and 40%. So if you measure the amount of runoff that comes off the site today using standard methods that we use, knowing it's woods, and then you build this with gravel and basins, our flows are gonna be between 20 and 40% less than they are today. And some of that we're required to do, some of it's a little over detention that we're providing. Once they come through and the tournament's over, everybody leaves, they rip up all the gravel, they turn this back to meadow. And they have used some native, they were explaining to me, they like to use, there's some native fescue grasses that grow up in a meadow that they've used other places on the club. When we do that and leave the stormwater facilities in, we have basically a 35 to 50% reduction in stormwater from today, because we still have the same detention facilities and stormwater facilities and infiltration as if there was all this impervious, but the impervious will be gone. And then it's gonna stay like that until another tournament comes, until the club comes up with a different development plan, or forever. And if they want to do something else that requires development approval, they'll come back to the township and we'll have to show you a plan that does that and do things that, you know, meet the requirements and force at the time. So I'm just trying to get it back to, I mean, although the big picture things to me are very helpful, but as far as what we're proposing in context of the township ordinances, it's like a development, but there's no building. There's no real parking lot. There's an entrance because they have to get these vehicles in, but once they're here during the tournament, there's not thousands of people coming and going every day in trucks and cars in here. Almost all the facilities are here. There'll be a few vehicles coming in and out. Everybody else will be coming in as part of the club's transportation plan for the tournament.
And that's the entrance that's across from Millview Lane?
Correct.
And what happens to that access after
It goes away.
the tournament?
We have a permit from PennDOT, traffic planning and design, the traffic engineers prepared a PennDOT application. Received on the club's behalf a highway occupancy permit. PennDOT issues permits for a year. Since this is temporary and the end condition is removing it, they will renew that permit next year, renew it again in 2026. And then sometime towards the second half of 2026, after everything is done, we'll take the last of the entrance away. That'll all be meadow, and then they'll close out the permit and there will not be a driveway.
So your plan is to take out the driveways too, even
Correct.
though they're
When
mechanical?
we're done, no, there'll be no gray on this plan. If I showed you the plan for when we're finished, it's all green.
Okay.
It's not woods, I'm not lying to you. It's not like it never happened, but
That's great.
they're gonna restore it to meadow like they've done in other places. It's not gonna be lawn with 2-inch tall grass. It's gonna be large meadow grasses that they maintain as a meadow. Until or unless the club decides they're gonna do something else in the future, in which case, like the past improvements, they'll come to the township and follow the rules for whatever their next thing is, whether it's another tournament or they have permanent facilities or whatever.
Is the gravel loose gravel or like they use in northern parts of the state, they modified?
It's
that
gonna be, it's
cementitious?
a course of modified.
Oh, so
It'll
it
be
is,
a lot like, I mean, we don't have many left in the township here. I don't know if there are, except for maybe in the state park, but it's gonna be, the top wearing course will be like, I say wearing course, will be like 2A modified, which is the 3/4-inch stone with fines packed in, and
Right.
it all packs down.
it'll firm up, yeah.
It'll firm up, and from a stormwater standpoint, it's almost identical to paving.
So
It's
It's
just not gonna
impervious, but
last
it's
10
loose gravel.
years. And it's much easier to remove, so there's not as much waste.
Like old
It can
road
be
binder.
scooped up and used somewhere else, rather than having a bunch of pavement they have to remove, break up, and doesn't have as many uses.
So there'll only be 4.5 acres of the gravel
Correct.
as opposed to 10.5 acres, which is the whole cleared area?
Correct, because we have to clear it to both build the basins, and then this is a tier, so this level is, I gotta look at things up, but I think it's about 15, 16 feet above this lower level. Because the ground sloped today. Which maybe we should touch on. There are a
What?
couple questions about steep slopes.
Why don't we?
Um,
Since we're there.
yes, there are some man-made steep slopes by the courts. And this is a grass path connecting so they can have some golf cart access. That is not regulated by the township because it's man-made. There are some steep slopes natural to the right of this connecting driveway. That's one of the things that Eric raised in his letter. It's one of the things we need to work through with the township because we have done similar things at some of the last work at Aronimink. When we did the Golf Learning Center, now the Golf Performance Center, there were some natural steep slopes beyond the new cart path we put in. And looking at the different ordinance provisions in the township, we originally applied for a conditional use. And then working with the zoning officer and the township engineer, which at the time, starting that project was Stantec instead of Pannoni. It was determined there is another section in the steep slope ordinance that says you can basically grade it as long as you don't put the facility in the steep slopes. And so it's a similar condition there. We had the cart path not in steep slopes, but we did some grading to get it in. And it says, as long as you don't have a cutter fill over 10 feet, that's a permitted use. I look at it, it's the same thing here. The steep slopes are not under the pavement. They're off to the side and we have some grading, but we have about 4 feet of grade change in the steep slopes.
So I read the engineer's letter and he said that there was some potential redesign to avoid the issue. Is this what the discussion is?
That's what the discussion's about. And if we could find, let me back up. The PGA and the club came to us and said, this is the footprint we need because we know we need all these facilities that they're experts in, not me. And if you look at the big picture of the club, other than the golf course and the vendor area that's already been cleared, the whole rest of the unused part of the club is woods,
Hmm.
which is great, but the club owns dozens of acres of woods that if they want to use it for something, they don't really have an alternative but to clear the trees. I mean, they're not doing it because, hey, it's great, we want to clear trees, but that's the only location that they could find that they thought worked, that we could come up with a plan that worked for them.
Well, let's focus just on the steep slope for the moment before
Yes.
we jump to the trees, but so is what you're saying is that you're continuing in discussions with the township or with the engineer for the purposes of resolving the steep slope issue?
Correct. Mark and I both believe that when we walk through all this with Andy and Eric, that we will come to agreement that conditional use is not required and that it's a permitted use to have. And again, we're talking about grading the land to the right of this driveway, so it's just a grassed area. So we're talking about grading that area, and it's steep slopes. It's not very steep, so it's between 15 and 25%.
So you don't have that agreement yet.
That's
You're
correct.
working on it, and I have this strong feeling that Mr. D'Amico is gonna be saying, we're really looking for approval from this planning commission tonight. And so when that comes and you don't have your agreement, what are you asking for from this planning commission tonight, since you don't have that agreement? Are you asking for an approval to invade the steep slope for the purposes of putting that second driveway in?
Well, I'll let Mark give the.
Yeah,
the
I'm
answer.
happy to weigh in, I guess, and I'm not trying to put Eric or Andy on the spot.
No.
And we not have adequate time from the second set of review letters to really have a chance to sit down. I would say this, the plan, probably wouldn't change, to get out of it. So the recommendation would be, I guess my thought would be, if we get a recommendation from the planning commission and between then and the supervisors, the township staff determines that a conditional use application needs to be made, then we would, need to have a hearing in front of the board of supervisors. I don't, and I'll let the township staff speak for themselves, but even if we needed a conditional use, I think it's pretty much a technicality, and I don't think we're really talking about, an issue that's a problem from an environmental standpoint or an erosion standpoint from the township.
I don't disagree, particularly since this is a temporary request for all
Yes.
practical purposes. And
For
we'll
all
come back to that later, but let's.
Yeah.
I mean, I look at Mark's, the way I would have answered it without any guidance from Mark is that we're looking for your recommendation on the plan in front of you. And if working with the township staff and consultants, we determined collectively that we do in fact need zoning approval or a conditional use, we have to obviously obtain those things before we finish that process. If we don't though, then we have gotten your thoughts on the plan as is. And I think as Mark said, it seems unlikely unless we were to exhaust all these approval avenues and not get a plan that is approved that looks substantively like this, that this is the plan we're going to keep moving forward with.
Okay. What else do you want to tell us about?
That's the most things I'm going to tell you. I'd be happy to answer any questions that.
How about the tree?
Yeah, let's talk
Yeah,
about the
let's talk
trees.
about the trees.
Okay, so, trees,
How many are there now, roughly?
about 890.
So, yeah, maybe I'll jump in. So the applicant and their staff provided what's called plot sampling. So they did not perform a tree by tree inventory. Sampling is very versed, very accurate. I do it all the time myself in the field. I went out and validated the sampling, which was spot on. However, as noted, there's 836 trees to be replaced as a requirement of the township.
836 to be replaced?
That is correct.
I thought it was 896 being removed.
So there's 900 being removed based on the sampling, okay? There's 836 being replaced, and that's based on the formula, dead and dying trees not calculated for. So today at 5 o'clock, we met with the Shade Tree Commission, and had a conversation regarding this project. And also speak with John Goslin, your superintendent, numerous times over the last week. I think he's down in Alabama, but we still had conversations. He's willing to do whatever we can to mitigate those areas. I know you discussed meadow. Is there any objection to going back and doing a woodland structure, having like an overstory, an understory, and a ground plane value on those areas that we're going to become meadow, decompact them down to 14 inches, and then replanting with forestry grade whips and restore and restock that area with a forest canopy?
I don't know that I can answer that. I mean, I understand what you're saying.
I'll look to Mark to answer it then.
I would look to John Goss. Have you talked to John?
I have,
about
yeah.
that?
And John, over the years, always shoots me straight, very honest guy. I believe his intent is to do the right thing at all times. That's what I take away from John.
Yeah.
And I believe we can find a happy medium here through replanting some meadows. But again, I'm sure the people in the back here will agree that canopy loss within a township is very sensitive.
Yep.
And mitigation and restocking after a project like this would be very beneficial. Yes, it's a degrading overstory. I looked at the woodland structure during our review, and I think we can improve on it. Doesn't have to be the entire area, but I think the benefit is there, and the opportunity of a clean slate to develop a sustainable and healthy woodland structure will work very well with the township.
So, and I would say in response to that, John, that to the extent that John Goslin's told you what he's able to do, then that's gold, right? That will happen. I would say though, that just I don't want to, Steve, can you zoom out to so that you can see?
But I guess for the membership, and some of the higher ups, what is the future plans of this area?
That's what we're getting to.
Yep. Because what we don't want to have is you mitigate it through planting forestry grade stock, and then 10 years from now it's condemned.
Right. So what you're looking at on the screen is just that's you give him the microphone. Oh, yeah, sure. I think that's pretty good right there, Steve. Thanks. Okay, perfect. All right, so just to orient everybody, this area in the middle is the driving range, right? Okay, and then up above is the tennis center, and you can see where the grading broadcast compound is going to be. So this whole area back here, you can see the property line of Aronimink Golf Club. Goes all the way around the driving range, and there's a large area with thousands of trees that will not be disturbed by this project there. Aronimink was originally designed for 27 holes. There's 18 holes plus a short game area on the other side of the driveway. So although the membership of Aronimink has not changed in years, meaning there's 325 active members or bondholders that own the club, it doesn't mean that more people don't want to play golf. People, there's a lot more activity in terms of younger folks who want to play, and they're, part of the family, so they have the ability to play. And there's a lot of demand on the golf course. Someday, right? And it's not today, it's not in the near future. That area was originally designed by Donald Ross to be used for golf, and we got a driving range in the middle of it now, so that part won't be there. And the tennis center, there were some golf holes there, and there was a golf hole on the left side of the driveway that's now a short game area. But there is some area that would allow for some number of holes, whether it's 3 or 4, 5 or 6, won't be 9. But long story short, part of the theory behind not reforesting the entire area is because part of that, and it won't be the whole thing, and there will be still boundaries and thousands of trees left there. We're sensitive to the fact that if we've gone to the effort to remove these trees, we would prefer to use meadow. Now, I'm saying that, but if John Goslin told you there was areas within that, yeah. But one thing one thing the club is committed to based on, and following what John said there is that, we would engage, either John or another arborist to do an entire full sampling, determine exactly how many trees, rather than using sampling. So, do a survey of the entire, 10 acres that's being, graded and cleared here. And then whatever that number of trees is, we will come up, John Gosselin, John Hosbeck will collaborate and figure out where to put those trees on Aronimink's property, and we'll do that. And it sounds like John Gosselin of Aronimink is suggesting that there are areas within the broadcast compound, once it's redone, that we could put trees. Whatever John and John come
Yeah,
up with.
at no means am I saying you need to do a tree by tree inventory. The sampling's fine. We
Okay.
went out and validated it.
Okay,
What my question is what the shade tree questions is how are you going to restock 836 trees that are required? That's
Right.
the question.
right.
Unless they request a waiver of that,
Now, let
which
me
is
ask,
always possible.
so it's been, I think, the preamble, it's been plus or minus 60 years since it was here. You know, if 15 years from now, PGA shows up and said, we really enjoyed our experience the last time, you know, I hate to be cutting down those trees that are now 15 years old and planted. So if, you know, there's got to be a non-zero number that they come back and need something similar.
Like designating 1 acre to a
Or
total
just
forest
the
mitigation,
perimeter, you know,
or
just so
perimeter,
it's not.
just something so we're recapturing. We're not looking to make the replace every little bit.
Yeah.
Things.
Yeah. And again, I would just, look, I don't have all the answers. Unfortunately, John Gosselin, is not here tonight. He's away from town. But, we're confident and, you know, willing to agree to a condition that we will, come up with a plan, that is approved by your township arborist, and we'll plant in accordance with that plan.
I'm sure we can find a happy medium.
I just
And
proceed.
we're not asking for a waiver, whatever the tree count is. And if we do a tree count, there possibly are, I think, you know, potential to, it might go down a couple trees because we find a little more dead trees. Then whatever that number is and whatever Mr. Hosbeck says is the number, we'll come up with a plan for that number and plant them.
Just procedurally, as we're discussing this, I just wanted to point out the plan that's before you with consideration. The landscaping page does say tree replacement area across what would be the gravel. So just to clarify, just to make sure we're on the same page, the plan does indicate the whole area being replanted. So I just want to make sure that's what
The plan indicates that there'll be trees planted in
Correct,
the
correct.
area.
Not meadow.
Okay, so the plans, yeah, it's in flux.
I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah.
That is what is on the plan. So if we're considering a discussion of otherwise, then that's.
Maybe stop and we'll do some public comment. Unless you,
Sure.
Scott,
I
don't you
have
want to wrap up
one
with
small
something?
Thing to add, just where if, and based on whatever agreement that the club can work out as far as areas of that would be reforested. We did have a plan that, like, we weren't just going to plant meadow, rip up the gravel and just, you know, throw seed down. So wherever we do decide to plant meadow and wherever we do decide to plant trees, we're gonna do what is proper to restore that vegetation in the way that works. So if we do decide we're reforesting a certain area, we're gonna do it with a detail that John thinks is the right thing to do. That, you know, if we're deep tilling and bringing in other soil and amendments, we're gonna do that so that whatever we decide has a good success chance to, you know, grow adequately. I just want to say that whether areas that are meadow and the areas that are woods, we're not, you know, we're going to do that the right way so that if we say we're restoring an acre to woods, we're going to do it in a way that we want success for that acre.
You've always been good stewards,
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, it's never a question of
Yeah.
we scored us.
Thank you.
So is there any public comment? Name and address, please, when we get up there.
Thank you. This green one here as well. My name is Janet Cravanis. I live at 23 Paper Mill Road, Newtown Square, Pennsylvania. I have lived there for 41 years. I come down St. David's Road, past this area where these trees are located, all the time. And I see the forest that is there. It's an old growth forest. It has reached, some of those trees are well over 100 years. I know that because I had an oak tree on my property that I had to take down, and it was about 200 years old. And I'm sure it was part of this same forest, because my backyard butts up against the Aronimink Golf Course. So to see these trees being removed in this old growth forest, which takes 100 to 300 years to mature, it's impossible to oftentimes regrow old growth forests because they are just so disrupted. And what they would need to do if we're going to reforest it is to be sure to closely use varieties of trees that are there already, because this is a community of trees. Trees communicate with each other through fungi that live underground. So they know each other. This is also, we live on a important bird area that's been designated by Audubon, because this is a migratory path, the Atlantic flyway. We're lucky to have our designation for that. We're lucky to have this forest. It's one of the few really large areas of trees left. I went on Google Earth today and looked down over Newtown Square, and I could see this forest and green country are one of the few areas. Our birds that are migrating have to rest during the day and come down into trees. Most birds migrate at night. And also, these trees to be planted need to support the native insects that we have. We're losing our insects. Some studies show that we've lost about 70% of our insects. Birds, insects need native plants. They're specific to native plants. And then their eggs can mature, the caterpillars can mature, and the birds need these caterpillars to feed their babies. So it's all tied up together. And this is not something that I just, my heart breaks when I think that a 10-day tournament does not balance with 100 years need to regrow this habitat.
Thank you. Jenna, can you spell your last name for us?
Yes, Krevenas.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Paul Seligson, and I live at 4727 Mill Hollow Lane, but I'm also chairman of Newtown Square and Bloom. So I'm deeply conflicted. My background is hotel business, so I understand when there's an event that you have to move heaven and earth in order to accommodate the event. I really get it, and I understand the importance of PGA, and I can understand the worldwide impact of this. It's very clear to me. On the other hand, I'm also committed to helping Newtown Square and Newtown Township with its tree canopy. And as some of you may know, we just did a huge planting on Goshen Walking Trail, and we planted 40 trees and 35 bushes. And these numbers are pale in comparison to the numbers of 875 and 900. And I echo what Janet Krevenas has just said about the secret lives of trees. I get that too. So I understand the concept of putting on an event, but I also understand the secret lives of trees, and trees communicate through their roots. And I really come down to what our arborist has stated in terms of some kind of a woodland, meadow woodland, but not all meadow, but not necessarily all woodland, but somewhere in between. That resonates the best with me, and I thank you for your comments, John. I just hope you guys can thread this needle, because you know what Janet was saying, to trade off trees that are that old and that established for a 10-day program is really massive. Boy, do I wish there was a different location within the Aronimink confines that this could be handled. But I realize how big it is, and I get the semis and I understand the trucks. So I understand what Aronimink is trying to pull off with PGA, but I also would love to find a whole different place for it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Evening, Sheila Sullivan, Feeney, Chair of the Newtown Township EAC. We understand this is an important plan. We welcome Aronimink. We appreciate they have taken our Sustainable Green Business Coalition pledge. So we appreciate the things that they have done to be sustainable. Our concern is this. When you look at and this is your guiding document, this is our comprehensive plan. If you look at chapter 6, every issue that we discussed tonight is in there. Fragmentation of our foresting. There are core habitat, which is Skunk Hollow. Nobody has talked about the watershed. Nobody has talked about the wetlands. They're all in proximity to us. The core habitat has been identified. Also, these plan calls for a 50-foot riparian buffer, and we have increased that to 100. So I do believe they might be protected. But if we're going to be doing something, we would look for guidance for the 100-foot. What we're looking at is trying to balance out the needs of the economics of this. This is a global event. We're appreciative of that. We all want this to happen, but really at what cost? How can we look at a 3-day golf event and say we can justify a 100-year-old growth forest, removing 900 trees? And remember, I don't think you understand the importance of what is snag tree. A dead tree has a place in a biodiversity. So we're asking you to take this pause, don't grant this waiver. And the reason being is we think there's another solution. By forcing this issue right now, this land will be destroyed. We're wondering what's going on the top tent, the merchandise tent. Okay, that is a 50,000 square foot tent that will be up there. That carries 1,000 items. We're wondering, is there another location for that merchandise tent? Could it be taken off campus? Just like Mr. Godwin, you have one of your off tents, I think at a Baptist church near the property on the event that you just did. There's other superstores or other locations that we could consider. Have you thought about a pop-up store where you could have a fulfillment center where the guests could purchase their goods and pick up their goods on the way out and maybe keep the inventory off? There's so many other solutions. We're asking you to not rush tonight to give them the waiver. So we take the time to really examine what are the other possibilities. To destroy 10 acres. I just think of that. PGA destroys 10 acres, 900 trees in Newtown Square for a golf event. My husband loves golf. But are we going to put our future and our environment at stake for the economics? Let's appreciate the event. Let's support them. Let's work together. But please, read your comprehensive plan. That is your principal document. It states in there everything that I mentioned. Fragmentation, port tab. If you read this document, which is your principle, what you're supposed to be making decisions on, you could not approve this plan. We're saying that there is a pathway forward. We just need to work together to find a better solution and not in the forest. Thank you.
Thank you.
Daniel Burnham, Radnor Township EAC. I agree entirely with my colleague from Newtown EAC, particularly with regard to our township's concern about the runoff that will still be coming down Darby Creek watershed area to Skunk Hollow. There will be clearing of land, but also disturbance of ground to create the parking lot. It's inevitable. And once the event is over and the gravel is removed, you have bare earth. You're going to be planting grass. Now, in this current weather we have, you can't guarantee me there's going to be suitable conditions for growing grass fast enough to retain that earth. you're going to be having sediment flowing off the property and ending up in Darby Creek. So our township is going to be maybe not suffering flooding, but will be suffering sedimentation. That's really my point as far as our town is concerned. But I also agree there are other ways that we can appreciate this land than such a costly enterprise that you are envisioning.
Thank you.
Eric, can you comment on the blown up map? I see, it looks like, I see some tributaries underneath that large pension basin that they show. Just kind of comment on where that goes and what's going there now and what it's going to be like afterwards.
So, yes, just a general,
Or whichever the best part of your comment.
well, I'll just kind of give you the overview and then maybe you can speak to it. This is essentially, you would describe it as an unnamed tributary to Darby Creek. So down at the bottom of the hill is Darby Creek. This portion of the property is kind of a natural ravine. So it's kind of where the headwaters start to form, come out of the side of the hill and forms into a small stream. Eventually goes down to Darby Creek further down. When there's discussion of the riparian buffer, that is the buffer they're setting. So one of the comments that I do have in there, and you might be able to speak more to it, is the code requires the establishment of the buffer and then, establishing the health and planting the buffer. So that's currently a comment that's in the review letter. So I don't know if you have anything.
So Eric's working kind of backwards. His last comment is that we showed on the plan that we would use existing vegetation in the riparian buffer. We have no problem agreeing to supplement that if there are areas that need more planting, and whether that gets reviewed with Eric, John, a combination thereof, that's no problem at all. There are tributaries, there are two of them. We had them delineated. We had the wetlands around them delineated again this year. So we do have an accurate location for where they are. We are showing an accurate riparian buffer. As discussed, the plan was originally submitted with the prior regulations that called for the 50-foot riparian buffer. There are places where we have more, but we do have that as a minimum. I kind of also just wanted to point to the last speaker's comments. The erosion and sediment controls for this project will be similar to what they have used on the other projects. We are just completing our work to submit the NPDES permit. We believe we have designed a rigorous set of ENS controls. It will be reviewed by the County Conservation District. I think the club has a very good track record of not just seeing what's on paper and putting that in, but making sure that they operate them and that the contractors doing the work operate them in a manner that is effective. None of us control the weather. If we had, if they finish the tournament and it looks like the weather looked, until the last week or two where it didn't rain for 2 months in a row, they'll have to keep the ENS measures in place. One of Eric's comments is that we need to beef up our construction sequence and describe how we're going to put the ENS measures back in place when we restore this from the gravel. And I totally agree with him. I think that of all the things we can discuss, the discussion of how you restore it, what's the value of tearing down the woods, those are valid things to have a discussion about. I have no doubt that we will show adequate ENS measures in the plan, that Eric will continue to make comments till he feels like we've done it correctly, that the Conservation District will also review it and make sure we're showing what is compliance with state law, and then that the club will institute and construct those things in a manner that works. So I don't really, of the concerns we've discussed, I think it's valid to talk about we're cutting down trees. It's valid to talk about how we restore it, but I have no doubt that the measures we put in, that the club has a good track record of doing that in a way that will keep the water clean downstream of the area, both during initial construction and then when they restore it, and making sure that something is growing and developed to prevent erosion downstream again when they're done.
There was a comment about the reduction in flow when the project is done. And do you have a feel for the magnitude of that reduction towards these tributaries that are flowing down to?
Yeah, so I kind of touched on that at the beginning. we're leaving we're not downsizing any of the stormwater. So the stormwater is designed to meet the township and DEP requirements for the gravel. So when we remove the gravel, we get a lot more stormwater reduction than you would have. So when we're finished, even under meadow, without any woods, if we did woods, it'd be even more. There's gonna be a reduction in peak flow from about 35 to 50% from the water that runs off today. Simply because we have to comply with the regulations of what happens when there's gravel, and the regulations require us to actually reduce flows. And when we remove the gravel, we'll be back to at least meadow, perhaps partially wooded. We're gonna be generating less water than when the gravel's there, and we're still gonna have these same stormwater basins. That water's gonna run off and then still be discharged slowly and limiting the peak flow.
So let's be perfectly clear. When everything's all done and said, and the tournament's over, and it's been a fantastic tournament, and you remove all the gravel, there'll be less water
There'll be less
emitted
runoff.
from the location than there is presently today.
That is correct.
Or the rate of flow be less, and ultimately the volume is the same.
Well, the volume will always be the same.
Well, that's what I'm just, yeah, it's the rate, that's right, yeah,
The
it's the
numbers I
rate of
gave you
flow.
are for peak rates, so it is rate of flow. The volume reductions, we do have to match and have a volume reduction for up to the 2-year storm. So up to a 2-year storm, we're designing it for that volume reduction with the gravel. Once the gravel is removed, then there will be a reduction in volume for those small storms. There is not a reduction in volume for the larger storms. Simply, it's not a township requirement. It's not a DEP requirement. There's going to be some, we do provide some, but I can't tell you, we don't usually model the volume of runoff for large storms.
How long based on this plan, you have to remove trees to get the open area there. How long from the time you remove the trees to the time that you put it back to how it's going to be
So
permanently?
They
What's
would
the
like
time
to
period?
start construction in the spring. So depending on when we get final approvals, including the NPDS permit and what the weather allows, say construction starts, pick a day, whether it's March, April 2025. The gravel will then be in place shortly thereafter, and that's going to stay until after the tournament in May 2026. And so then they will start that restoration process in, say, June of 2026. It's going to depend on the weather and what happens. I think if you have any normalish weather, the idea would be to have things in place that will deal with the rains and the moisture that comes in the fall. So you get a lot of growth in the fall of 2026. You get even more in the spring of 2027. So notwithstanding some super prolonged drought, including over the winter, I would think by 2027, so 2 years, you then have a functioning ecosystem. And like everybody knows, I'm not going to, even if we reforest areas, they're not going to go from planting whips or individual trees to towering trees right away, but they're going to hold the soil down in place so that sometime in 2026 or the spring of 2027, I would expect we remove the last remaining erosion and sediment control measures because the ground is totally stabilized and there's vegetation on everything.
Thank you.
Any public comment to follow up? Reverend McMahon?
Just a quick question to the previous speaker, Dan Burnham, Radnor EAC again. Did you say the gravel would be in place for a year, from May of this year to May of 2026?
Year and 2 months.
Why is that necessary?
A couple reasons. They have to have the setup in place for two things. One is they do have some initial facilities that will be in place early on next year through the tournament. Not the dozens of trucks and all those things, but there are certain things they have to do with logistics. The other thing is that the PGA wants to make sure that things that require genuine infrastructure construction are in place and we know they're working. They are not going to be comfortable that we go, oh, we'll build this in the spring of 2026 and have it in place for a month before the tournament takes place. I mean, it's a combination of those two things.
I guess I speak for myself. It feels like we need to iron out the whether it's a meadow, whether it's trees, whether it's some combination thereof. There's just discussion and things to kind of be ironed out on that. Speaking for myself on that, but.
I second that.
Yeah,
I would agree.
I'm not certain I agree with that. And I'll tell you a number of reasons why. Okay, and I'm sure you were expecting something of this. So first, I'm not 100% confident that land development approval is required here. Now, I understand that the township has suggested that, but and I certainly appreciate that you've gone through this process and certainly have presented everything. But there actually was a recent case, the decision was issued on November 7th of this year. That's like 3 weeks ago. That really called into question when a property owner is developing their own property, and even if they're changing it, that's not really a land development process. Because what we have here is we have a property owner that has owned these trees since 1896. So probably the owners of the property are been longer than the trees have been have been grown if they're 100-year-old trees, because this is 130 years now by the time the tournament occurs. So the property owner is asking to do something with his land that's frankly temporary in basis. I mean, 2 years is a decent time, 18 months, 2 years. So as a consequence, I don't think it's a big ask, and the property owner is only going to affect his property as long as they have the consents of the one property owner. And I think I saw it here, Klinghopper or something like that, Klingheimer is the one adjacent that comes in the closest proximity. And it looks like they have tree plantings around that area. So as a consequence, because it's a very temporary proposal, it's not a permanent proposal, I don't see this as a big ask. And the fact that they've been cooperative in trying to work with the township throughout, I'm very much in support of moving this forward. I understand that neighbors and other township residents don't appreciate that 800, 900 trees are going to be taken down. I get it, but a person has a right to do what they want to do on their property. And we don't have a right to tell the property owner not to do it if that's what they want to do. So as a consequence, there's I mean, I understand and I appreciate that they're working with Eric and the township solicitor and the township engineer to keep it close. But to be perfectly candid with you, I think that the conditions and the cooperation, I fully support this. This is a good thing for this township. This is a big thing for this township. And I'm very much in favor of it. And I'd be inclined to certainly recommend it to the Board of Supervisors and let them make their decision on that.
Well, I think you said that they asked you to go through this process.
Yeah. So.
And you agreed to go through this process.
Well, we agreed to file a land development application, but we're asking for a waiver. So again, what's the difference, right? We have subjected ourselves to the normal scrutiny of the township and a land development, which, as you know, is a significant amount of review, right? Township arborist, township engineer, township zoning officer, township fire marshal, EAC, and so we've already done that, but we still do believe that the appropriate action by the township is to waive land development. And all that means is that we don't have to record the plan and we don't have to enter into a land development agreement. Otherwise, we will get a grading permit, and that grading permit will have the same conditions, meaning that we will need to work through with the township engineer and satisfy all their concerns. And the same with the township zoning officer, and same thing with the township fire marshal. But what it does help us to do if we can get through the planning commission tonight is to move that process forward, knowing that there's still several weeks of that back and forth. But as Neil explained 20 minutes ago, that plan is not going to change. So I'm not really sure what we're going to accomplish with the planning commission. Again, other than this idea of, you know, we can't sit here today, and I'm not sure we can sit here even a month from now to be able to show you exactly we're going to plant 900 trees or whether we're going to plant 875 trees. But what we can commit and have committed to, and have we've done, Mr. Goslin has done with Mr. Hosbeck for, I don't know how many years this has been, is collaborate to get the best plan, and whether that's partial tree canopy here or, you know, more of a tree canopy there or less. We're going to have the buffer plantings, as Neil pointed out, along St. David's Road, and we're going to find a place for 800 plus trees elsewhere on our campus. And again, just to emphasize, we're not asking for a waiver from that, right? We're not asking, can we only plant 200 trees? We're going to plant the number of trees that's required by your tree ordinance.
Or you just want to reduce process?
Yeah, well,
I mean,
we think,
ultimately,
we
what you
haven't
do-
reduced it much. I mean, we've been at this for several months and we've gone through quite a process.
Just want to
We
speed it
just
up.
would like to, you know, move on from here.
I will tell you that the MPC, the Municipal Planning Code, does permit modifications. You know, the planning agency, if authorized to approve applications within the subdivision and land development ordinance, may grant a modification of the requirements of one or more of the provisions if the literal enforcement will exact undue hardship because of peculiar conditions pertaining to the land in question, provided that such modification will not be contrary to the public interest and the purpose and intent of the ordinance observed. The bottom line here is, because this is a temporary, so a temporary request, there's no permanency here. There's no, I mean, look at the improvements are going to be made. The stormwater management proposals are going to be retained. It's going to be better than it was before. I frankly, I think it should be sent on to the Board of Supervisors.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not expressing dissatisfaction with the plan. I just see loose ends that haven't been ironed out. I mean, I think in the end, the stormwater is good. You know, the Darby Creek, we regularly hear about the problems. So, you know, if the runoff from there, the rate of flow is reduced, you know, that's a positive. It just feels like details that haven't been ironed out, and I guess what you're thinking is just the supervisors will tackle that.
I am.
I would make it subject to.
I am quite, I mean, any approval or recommendation, we're gonna say it's subject to the satisfaction of the engineer's review letter. We're gonna say it's satisfactory to the township arborist's review. Of course, the fire marshal, they'll need to get their NPDES permit. I mean, they can't do anything without that. And I mean, there are a sundry of protections as far as the conditions of construction are concerned. You know, the issue comes, I mean, just take it this way. If they weren't going to do anything and this tournament was not coming and they wanted to cut down all these trees, they could do it tomorrow. They could do it tomorrow. It's their land.
I mean, they have
Just
to replace
because-
them, but yes,
No,
I think
no, because it's private property. They would not have to replace them if nothing was being done. They would not. You can cut the tree down on your property. The only time the municipality can come in and say something is when they want to do a full land development.
so the volume of trees doesn't change the issue.
No, it's a red herring. No, their property. They won't cut them all down, and they want to be
Right.
cooperative because they always have been
Right, they've
cooperative.
been good stewards.
Yes, so I think you have to just. We have controls, we have mechanisms, we have professionals in place. Time to move on.
I hear a motion.
Yeah, I should make a motion and we'll see how it goes.
Well, then I would, that's why I asked the question, what are you asking for? I will, if we will just take a 2-minute recess so I can get these thoughts together, if you don't mind.
Not at all.
Well, didn't they make a big deal about the ones down here on the corner on West Chester Pike when the guy came out, cut all the trees down? Wasn't that a couple of years ago?
Oh, yeah, I want to put the roof up there.
Yeah. Mhm. Right here at the end of Ellis,
At the end of Ellis on the left.
on the left. There was
Guy
a
that
ton of trees. Well, yeah,
In that
it's
place.
seen, it's commercial.
Yeah, yeah.
Part of the land is,
Zone commercial along with.
Ellis is right
But
here.
it's on, but it's on three.
It's on three.
Zone commercial.
Yeah. I remember that happening. That was a couple of years ago when I first went.
Yeah,
to town.
he didn't have this. Right, neighborhood.
Yeah. But like, I'm not opposed to, it, as long as they just, they, you know, they know they're replacing those trees for what they are. You know,
Yeah.
whether or not it's right there or, you know, scattered throughout the course itself.
Yeah, that and my only other, which they're gonna do.
I agree that it's their property.
Right.
It's their property.
Playing a long game.
I just had some. This whole thing, this.
Hmm?
here, I don't have that.
Yeah, they close that off, yeah.
I mean, they're playing a long game. 10-year long.
Yeah, well, they establish the area and then they're gonna put something else there.
Well, go there with PGA traffic and-
Absolutely, yeah,
That's why I.
which is smart, that's,
It's a win.
Okay, let's go.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that brief adjournment, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion for the Planning Commission to recommend to the Newtown Township Board of Supervisors to approve the proposed application submitted on behalf of Aronimink Golf Club, which seeks a waiver of the land development requirements, which for all practical purposes is really limited to recording of a plan, and favorably recommend the plan that has been proposed on behalf of the Aronimink Golf Club for this temporary improvement of the area to construct a broadcast compound, I think as it's been described. However, this recommended approval, of course, would be conditioned on compliance and the resolutions of the concerns raised in the township engineer's letter of November the 19th, and as may be further amended through discussions with the engineers for the property owner, along with compliance with the requirements and again, subsequent anticipated discussions with the township arborist, certainly obtaining the requisite NPDES permit for the sediment and erosion control issues, compliance with the fire marshal's requirements as they may be. And certainly, of course, it would be conditioned upon the PennDOT approval being retained and renewed through the conclusion of the tournament. With that said, I would like to move for the approval of this plan to the Board of Supervisors.
We have a second?
Second.
All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you very much.
For all your time here. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks.
You're all done?
Done for the evening, right?
Yeah. Do a motion to adjourn,
Motion?
second,
I'll second.
all in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
So there's things here for the next
Merry
time around.
Christmas.
Yeah.
The after Christmas. Yeah.
I'll be,
So I won't see you.
30th, Monday, 30th.
yeah, I'll be out of town.
I'm amazed.
Your guy.